Welcome to Capital Catch-Up. I'm Victor.
And I'm Lenny. Today we're taking a look at the latest congressional record, which, in this case, tells us there was no activity reported for the period in question.
That's right, Lenny. The official source simply notes that there were no bills introduced, no nominations confirmed, no committee hearings, and no daily entries logged. While that might seem like a quiet moment, it actually offers us a chance to reflect on how the legislative process works when the floor is calm.
Absolutely. When we see a gap like this, it's often because Congress is in a recess or a lull between major legislative pushes. Historically, the Senate and the House have scheduled breaks around holidays, district work periods, and even strategic pauses before big votes. For example, in the early 1990s, there were several weeks in the summer when no major legislation moved forward, giving members time to return to their home states and meet constituents.
Those recesses serve a practical purpose. Lawmakers need time to gather input from the people they represent, especially on issues that might be on the docket later. It also allows committees to digest the work they've already done, finalize reports, and prepare for the next round of hearings.
Speaking of committees, even when there are no public hearings recorded, the staff and members are still busy behind the scenes. They might be drafting language for future bills, negotiating with stakeholders, or reviewing the impact of existing laws. The legislative engine keeps turning, even if the public ledger shows a blank page for a week.
That's a good point. The process of turning an idea into a bill involves several steps. First, a member of the House or Senate introduces a proposal, which is then assigned a number, House bill or Senate bill, depending on the chamber. From there, it gets referred to the relevant committee, where subject matter experts hold hearings, gather testimony, and may amend the text. If the committee votes to report it, the measure moves to the full chamber for debate and a vote.
And after it clears one chamber, it goes to the other, where the same process repeats. If both chambers pass identical versions, the bill heads to the president for signature or veto. If there are differences, a conference committee works out a compromise. All of that can happen quickly when there's momentum, but it can also stretch over months, especially if the political climate is divided.
In a period with no recorded activity, we often see the tail end of that cycle. Perhaps a bill was just signed into law, or a nomination was confirmed in the previous week, and now the focus shifts to implementation. Implementation can be just as impactful for everyday Americans as the passage of the law itself.
Right, take for instance the rollout of a new healthcare provision. The law might have been enacted months ago, but the real effects, like new insurance enrollment periods, changes to Medicare reimbursement, or updates to pharmacy benefit structures, are felt when agencies release guidance and providers adjust their practices. Those implementation steps rarely make the headlines, but they're critical for citizens.
Another angle to consider is the strategic timing of legislation. Leaders often wait for a quiet window to introduce controversial measures, hoping to avoid the noise of a packed calendar. Conversely, they might hold back on a popular bill until after a recess, ensuring that members are back in Washington and ready to vote.
That's why watching the calendar is essential. Even when the daily record shows nothing, the upcoming schedule can hint at what's coming. For example, if a major conference is slated for the next month, we might anticipate a flurry of bills related to that theme, be it infrastructure, climate, or national security.
So for our listeners, the takeaway from a blank activity report is twofold. First, understand that the legislative process is continuous, even if the public logs are momentarily empty. Second, keep an eye on the broader context, recesses, upcoming committee markups, and the political calendar, to anticipate where the next wave of action will emerge.
And remember, the lack of new bills doesn't mean the government is idle. Agencies are still enforcing existing laws, courts are interpreting statutes, and constituents are engaging with their representatives. All of those interactions shape policy just as much as the formal introduction of a bill.
Looking ahead, listeners should watch for the next set of committee reports that are scheduled to be released, as those often signal the topics that will dominate the floor in the coming weeks. Also, keep an eye on any upcoming nominations that might be confirmed once the Senate reconvenes, especially for key positions in the Department of Education, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Federal Reserve.
And if you're curious about the historical patterns, you might recall that after a quiet period in the spring of 2001, Congress moved swiftly to pass the Economic Growth and Tax Relief Reconciliation Act. That shows how a pause can be followed by rapid legislative activity when the political will aligns.
In summary, While today's official record shows no congressional activity, the machinery of governance is still at work behind the scenes. Stay tuned to the calendar, watch for upcoming committee work, and keep an ear out for any nominations that may surface once the chambers are back in session.
That's all for this episode of Capital Catch-Up. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next round of congressional developments.
Until then, stay informed and engaged.
Goodbye.